Following Wednesday's budget, you can talk about inflation, interest rates and tax cuts all you like. But the elephant in the room is that public spending and the size of the state is our real problem. Businesses sweat over their spreadsheets, looking at staffing costs, tax liability and overheads and how they tally with income. Capitalism is wonderfully efficient and unforgiving. If you run a business, you are allergic to waste. Profligacy and waste are kryptonite to a private enterprise. In the public sector, not so much. The doctors and nurses who work in our NHS are brilliant. But why do people boast that the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe? That's not a good news story, that's a bad news story, demonstrating the NHS's wild inefficiency, particularly given that we lag in almost every league table of comparable countries when it comes to illnesses like cancer. With a health service asleep at the wheel for decades as the population gets fatter, more diabetic and more medicated, we've got problems. Given the hysterical cost of the NHS, public health is a disaster. It's enough to make you sick. Meanwhile, many of our state schools do an excellent job and there are plenty of good teachers out there who give a lot. But the cost per pupil in England of educating a child is approaching £10,000 a year per child. Are those kids really getting bang for their buck, especially when you look at the World League tables of academic achievement? Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education, a former head teacher himself, told me on this programme just a few months ago that Britain spends among the most in the world on education, but lags behind relatively poor countries like Vietnam, whose children achieve higher attainment in subjects like maths at a fraction of the cost. And why would that be? Well, because of traditional teaching methods, discipline, and a culture of hard work and accountability in the classroom. And last time I checked, none of those things cost a penny. As proved by former social mobility czar Catherine Birbalsingh, whose free school in Wembley, Michaela Community School, has transformed the fortunes of some of the poorest kids in the borough, getting them to Oxford and Cambridge in some cases, not by spending money, but by ditching woke, progressive teaching methods in the classroom. Waste in the public sector is everywhere, but because it's public money, no one cares. Suppliers to the public sector overcharge for goods, contractors overcharge for services. And what about NHS managers on six-figure salaries, 3,500 and growing? Or police forces visiting people for rude tweets and spending thousands painting cop cars in the colour of the rainbow and using police time telling us not to misgender convicted male paedophiles who want to be a lady. And what do the councils do with the billions that we pump in their direction, given the fact that they can barely collect the bins every week? So-called austerity in the 2010s was anything but. It barely scratched the surface. You, the taxpayer, are not getting value for money. And now that things are so tight, with departmental budgets inevitably shrinking, we face the perfect storm of rising costs and worse public services. Things were bad before the pandemic, but the current government has sunk us with lockdowns. So we've now got to go for a simple economic model, one which is low tax and small state to generate prosperity for all. This is not trickle down, it's trickle up. A growing economy helps everyone and provides the national income with which to support the neediest in our society. We cannot carry on living like we are, surviving on the crack cocaine of credit with anemic growth and ever-increasing taxes. Post-COVID, we now have a bloated state that wants to do everything for you, including wipe your arse. Well, it's a race to the bottom. The problem is clear. We are living beyond our means and have done for decades. And we're ignoring shocking amounts of waste and inefficiency in the public sector. With some commentators now talking about a universal basic income, paying people to sit at home watching Loose Women and Countdown, expectations are now far too high about what the government can do in our lives. especially one running a colossal budget deficit. The state should shrink and the economy should grow. At the moment, it's the other way round. No one wants to talk about it or acknowledge it, but out of control public spending is the elephant in the room. Tusk, tusk.